Alex Karaban was on the Blue Ribbon Report's first team All-American list. What are the 4 things he has to do to stay there? You're locked on UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to ask you for a couple quick favors. If you're enjoying the content here, please take a second to subscribe to the show and follow the audio versions wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever. It really helps the show grow, and I can't tell you how much that support means to me. I really appreciate it. I also wanted to mention that I've worked out our 10% donation to Bleeding Blue for Good. So anything that you do in supporting UConn and their athletics through Locked On UConn, a donation, 10% will go to Bleeding Blue for Good. Thanks so much for being part of this huge Locked On UConn community and the UConn athletic community as a whole. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so Alex Karaban has 4 things that he needs to do to justify his All-American list from Blue Ribbon or any other publication that's going to give him a preseason All-American. The 4th one is probably the most important. So let's go over them. Number 1, last season, Alex averaged about 13 points per game. So a natural progression would think, hey, you're going to be counted on more. It's a younger team. 16 points per game would be probably the threshold where you're kind of undeniable in that realm, where you can uptick your scoring about 3 points per game and solidify his role as the team's unquestioned leader. Also, with the loss of Donovan Clingan, Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, Steph Castle, AK will be leaned on more heavily because it's a very young team that is also counting on sophomores and freshmen to contribute at a high level. So I think the game that I would point to where he really stepped up was Texas at Madison Square Garden in the early parts of last season, where he had 20 points and 6 rebounds, really proving he can perform in those key moments. Also, if you look at the game at Villanova, tied at 58, he gets a pass, I believe, from Cam Spencer in the corner for a 3 to put them up 3 points on a tough road game with about 2 minutes to go. The kid is clutch. I think with more opportunities, you'll see his scoring jump. Secondly, I think his rebounding is going to have to get an uptick. I've had this conversation before with people that are on YouTube comments talking about, well, our bigs didn't really rebound that well. I think our bigs only averaged about 7 and 5 rebounds a game last year, respectively, between Clingan and Samson Johnson. So I think Alex is going to be asked to stick his nose in and get more defensive rebounds. Then it's all a collective. Everyone's going to have to try to rebound to kind of take over some of those numbers and really kind of put us in the right spots. But I think Alex is going to be incumbent on himself to kind of take up that mantle of getting a couple extra rebounds a game. So I think he was at 5 last year. So if he's at about 7 rebounds a game, it's not about the stats, it's about the aggregate. So like that kind of average will automatically give them a better team based off of not giving teams extra offensive possessions. If it's on the defensive side, being a more effective offensive rebounder to give us more possessions when we have great shooters that we can kick it out to. So these are the things that I expect from him. I also think he's going to spend some time at the power forward position. So I think his rebounding numbers should have an uptick just based off of that. And then thirdly, his field goal percentage and 3-point shooting consistency. Now, if you're listening to that and you go, what are you talking about? This kid's a great shooter. He is. Don't get me wrong, but this is a tried and true stat. AK shot 32% from 3-point range in quad 1 games. So what does that mean? If you don't know what a quad 1 game is, it's against teams that are top 50 and above at home, top 1 through 75 when you're playing a road game. So let's just better competition. So whenever he would play a team that had better competition, there was a gap there where he wouldn't shoot as well. Does that mean he's maybe playing against a better athlete that closes out faster and he doesn't get as clean a look? Maybe. But 45% in other matchups just kind of shows that kind of gap matchup where he does need to improve against top tier opponents. So that is, I feel like it's a minor thing, but it can kind of solidify himself as a first round draft pick. If he shoots, if those numbers get up to about 40% when he's playing against better competition and he's a 40 to 45% 3-point shooter across the board from 3-point range, I mean, he's in the top 15 of the draft next year without a doubt. Because number 4, the fourth thing on this list is his leadership and intangibles. So beyond the stats, his leadership, his basketball IQ, his ability to position teammates makes him invaluable. So everything I just said, if everything stays the same and UConn is doing well around him because of his leadership, he still should have consideration to be a first-team All-American just based off of this. Dan Hurley had a quote. I don't remember what game it was after, but he said, this is a direct quote, "Sports used to be about champions. Now this is a champion." He was talking about Tristan Newton, who's doing everything right, but might not get the attention he deserves. And so he continued to, let me find the quote because that's not the exact quote, and I had it earlier. He basically said, not to take away from it, but essentially that the people that are watching this game and are judging don't really know about anything because they're watching like TikTok highlights and stuff like that. So that resonates so much with UConn fans because, yeah, do we have the guys that are averaging 20, 25 points a game and dominating college basketball? No, but as a collective, as a team, AK does so much in improving the players around him that those intangibles will kind of almost collapse the rest of my argument of those 3 upticks. If he does those 3 things and has all the leadership and intangibles on top of it, this team is going to be incredible next year, and I'm so looking forward to it. Coming up on Locked On UConn, we're going to talk about Eric Reeve. Very much in play for UConn. Got some reports on him, and also one other quick report on Braylon Mullins, and of course, football updates. We play Merrimack this weekend. It's all coming up after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or day alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only. Available to U.S.-based customers. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto. We just talked about Alex Karaban and his All-American status preseason from Blue Ribbon Report. Some of the other guys that were on that list, let's take a quick look. First team was Hunter Dickinson out of Kansas, Alex Karaban, Connecticut, RJ Davis, North Carolina, Caleb Love from Arizona, and Mark Sears from Alabama. Don't really have any complaints there. The second team is Johnny Broom, Cooper Flagg from Duke, Wade Taylor IV from Texas A&M, Zakai Ziegler from Tennessee. My wife will be happy about that. And our old pals from Purdue, Braden Smith on a second team All-American there. And then third team, this one I'm shocked that Ryan Kalkbrenner isn't on a second team and Cooper Flagg is. Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, Graham Ike from Gonzaga, Robbie Avila from St. Louis, Jawan Roberts from Houston, Taman Lipsey from Iowa State. And then fourth team is Omar Balo, Great Osabor from Washington, Yaxel Lendeborg from UAB. I honestly have never heard of him. Terrible by me. Hunter Salas from Wake Forest. He's a fantastic player. And then obviously LJ Cryer from Houston, another good player. Yeah, again, people are going to, I definitely do have a Duke bias. I can't stand Duke, but Cooper Flagg, I'm sure he's going to be the number one pick in the draft. Awesome. Not having a 3-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year as a second team All-American and putting essentially a freshman that's never done anything on the second team is just dumb. So put him, if you want to put him on third or fourth team just to kind of have him on but hey, you got me talking about it. So anyway, that's here nor there. What do Husky fans want to know about anyway? So Eric Reeve is a 7-foot, 230-pound forward center from Maryland. He is very much in the hunt for UConn. A couple developments that recently just happened. He canceled his visits to Kentucky and North Carolina, narrowing down his choices so far. This all can change. Remember, fluid situation, but as of right now, Kentucky and North Carolina are out. Choices are down to UConn, Kansas, and Creighton. Those are the highest of high right now. He is actually taking a visit to UConn this weekend. He'll be here September 6th. I'm sure they'll have wonderful things to say about him. Seems like a great kid from everything that I've learned from him. Really hard worker, has excellent footwork. They're going to probably position him as a power forward center. He is not a big kid. 230 pounds at 7 foot is rail thin. If you do a deep dive on him, you'll see it. You'll understand why. But he's very long, and he has the ability to run the floor. Those are things that I think he really fits into UConn's skill set well. He is kind of a game changer, in my opinion. He is becoming he was in my top 3 list anyway of guys I think they should be going after, along with Nico Bandala, who is just here, and saw some cool pictures of him on Instagram of him being in a UConn jersey. So, fingers crossed that works out, because if you were to get him and Reibe, I've heard it's Reibe. I've called him Reibe. I apologize. If you were to get Reibe and Bandalo on the team, I mean, you got a two-headed monster of 6'11", 7 foot that both can shoot it from 3. But let's just dive into Reibe, into Eric's game. I honestly think about Luke Murray's offense. He would fit perfectly into it. Pick and roll situations. Name your guard, whether it's Ahmad Noel, whether it's solo ball, Aidan Mahaney, having that kind of security blanket where they don't need to full rotation. They can actually pull a big out to have to guard Eric Reeve because he can shoot the 3. And what happens then? All the lanes to get to the hoop, open up. Now you're talking better lane and better spacing for Ahmad Noel. You're talking better slashing to the hoop from solo ball. Jaden Ross, Jalen Stort, the guys who I think would benefit from a big who can step out and take a shot blocker away from the rim, a rim protector. So that's just one thing. Then he already excels in the dribble handoff game. This is kind of part of of what he does, because he has the ability to shoot the 3 and step back. He kind of can make those smart reads. So he fits perfectly into that Luke Murray offense, where bigs are expected to make decisions with the ball, and not just to be about, hey, I'm just going to be a rim protector and an offensive rebounder. He definitely has some future potential to be this type of player, to be a skilled shooter, which he already is, but at the college level. And he's just more than just a traditional interior player. So, 7 feet, 230 pounds, not the biggest of kids. I think UConn likely would like to bulk him up to around 240 if he does commit to begin his career in next season in 2025. But I think he really will fully develop an inside-out game, because if you look at some film of him, I love the way when he receives an entry pass, he doesn't bring it down. A lot of younger players do that. He's got it up here so that he can survey the floor, kick it out if needed. So there's, not letting little guards come in and try to rake at him and create turnovers that way. Good passer out of the post. So I think he is rapidly becoming a top priority for UConn's 2025 class. And I think there's mutual interest, obviously, because of the visit this weekend. So wow him, guys. See what his NIL value is eventually. And, I know that's not what you lead with, but I think that's obviously a part of the game when we're talking about Kansas and Creighton being in the mix as well. A quick side note before I jumped on to record here, one of my sources it's a really very well trusted individual, does not work for an outside entity, as Dan Hurley likes to call them, but is very well respected in college basketball, said that Braylon Mullins is down to 3 schools, of one of which is UConn. The order of which may surprise you, but may not. Indiana is number 1, Kentucky number 2, UConn 3. His quote: "If IU coaching situation was more stable, it would be over, but IU will definitely offer the most money." So not saying UConn is a no, but they are definitely shooting their shot. So there is definite interest in Braylon Mullins, according to my guy. And obviously there is, because, he's having an in-home visit, I believe, today or tomorrow. And so, look, these are all wars. These are all little mini battles that you have to try to win to to my sources' point about IU not having the most stable coaching situation. That's just a fact. That's our biggest advantage over any of these schools, even Kentucky. Forget about, I've heard good things about Mark Pope, and I think he's going to be a good coach for Kentucky. But he's a first-year coach there. Is he going to be able to handle the pressure? We already know what Dan Hurley has. Dan Hurley is 100%, he talked about this, has access to these players. And it's really just about, can they close them, and is there mutual interest? And the thing with Braylon is, and this is, again, confirmed from a guy who knows this area really well, I don't think he wants to leave the state of Indiana, but he will if he doesn't feel comfortable with the IU staff. That's basically just the crux of that situation. So stay tuned for more on that. I will get more as time goes on, but really not trying to break any news here, but that's just something that came to me right before I started recording. So let's take a quick turn and talk about our favorite subject here on Locked On UConn, the football team. We'll be talking about Football Friday and all the things that are coming down the pike, but I just wanted to go over some quick thoughts on this past game, as I already have in the past, and also talk about what to expect from UConn against Merrimack. Coming up after this. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We all have something a little different for you now. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of Sunday Ticket from your YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, when you're a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market games. Get that 3-week free trial. All you got to do is bet $5. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So if you go do it for 3 weeks and it's not for you, guess what? You cancel. No big deal, right? Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Before we start in on one of the stats I was talking about that was the most frustrating thing for me when it came to the UConn football team, I want to talk to you about Exit 68. Exit68.com is one of my new good friends here. Dan Meehan sent me a couple of great shirts. This is the Andre Ran Everywhere shirt. So some really great UConn apparel. They're not an official sponsor. Dan is a friend of mine. I think he's fantastic. He's been on the show. I think their apparel is great. It's totally different than some of the other stuff that we've talked about on the show. And so it's a nice, good subset for UConn fans to really kind of dive into the past culture of the team and also the current stuff. So Dan, really appreciate you and all you do at exit68.com. I know you're a Locked On supporter, so really appreciate that. But this is a really cool shirt. I'll probably wear the other one, and I'll unveil it another day this week. So go get yourself a t-shirt from exit68.com. And I don't have a promo code for you, but tell Dan I sent you. You can DM him on Instagram or on Twitter and tell him that you heard about it on my show. So let's get to the football stuff. All UConn fans want in this next game is essentially basic football. I had a boss that I hated a long time ago, but the one thing I'll take from what he would say when whether the sales team or the product team was in a slump is he would just say, we just need to get back to blocking and tackling. Probably the best thing he ever said in his entire career of being a business development manager is that sometimes that's all you need is whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, and especially when you're in football, all you need is the basics. Sometimes you need blocking and tackling and stop trying to invent the wheel, right? So to my point last week, I couldn't find the yak numbers, yards after catch. So I finally took some time. A friend of mine let me look at his Pro Football Focus premium account because I don't have one. So I'm doing the whole Netflix borrow on the Pro Football Focus premium account. But the yak number total, and I'm going to say it out loud because I read it and I had to look at it a couple times. I had to lean in and go, I'm sorry, what? It was 237 yards after catch. I'm just going to let that sit there for a second because that's appalling. And that's a team that doesn't believe. So what I'm hoping is it was an aberration, right? that this is something we'll look back at the end of the season and go, man, Maryland was actually a really good team. And they were a sneaky potential to get into, make the college football playoff this year, that they're 10-2 and they had some big wins. They beat Michigan, whatever. And wow, UConn really just ran into a buzzsaw because I don't think that's the truth. I think Maryland really will go 7-5 or 8-4 and go to a bowl game and be decent and be a middle of the road Big Ten school. And I want to feel like we missed a huge opportunity to set up an identity for our football program. Because if it's the alternative that it was essentially just, man, this team is so good, they run the table on the Big Ten, maybe it was just, that's just bad luck. But with all this talk around the Big 12, you're on a national stage, it's game one, and you throw that clunker out there. I mean, the game plans were atrocious. I know that people are not going to like to hear this because it's not professional football, but it kind of is, guys. This is a farm system for the pros. You have professional coaches on your staff. Jim Mora has been coaching the NFL for years. He's got the coaching pedigree. So, it's midweek. We're not going to dive into all of it because we have a Football Friday coming up, and I'll get out more frustration there when we talk about Merrimack and what that UConn needs to do. But I'm imploring UConn fans to at least not give up because these kids are trying. This is a college football program. I am never going to be on the kids because I think there are some really solid players out there. I think there's some really good athletes out there. I think there's some players that can actually play. But I just want this coaching staff to see if it can figure out. I mean, I'll give you a great example. We have 2 wide receivers on this team, TJ Sherfield and Skylar Bell. They have 20 touchdowns between them in the Big Ten. Total. That's their career. Why weren't we using them on a regular basis in that past game? You saw a lot of Skylar Bell. Sherfield scored a touchdown, but it was too late. You can't go into a season saying things are going to be different, that this team is a good program, and then give us that game and expect this fan base to be excited about things. I've said it before. I'll say it again. If UConn was somewhat competitive, I'm not talking about losing overtime, somewhat competitive, lose the game 38-27, 38-17. Hell, if they scored 20, if UConn scored 4 touchdowns and Maryland scored 50, at least you could be like, man, the defense really just wasn't up to snuff, but the offense looked great. So you got to take some positive out of it. But there was none of that. No blocking, no tackling. So if things don't change, then it might be time to look at who's calling plays and who's the head of this snake, who the leadership is on this UConn football program. Because you got to get into the next century in play calling. I remember, if you're a Giants fan, some of you are Giants fans, Patriots fans, Jets fans. We got fans all over New England that are fans of all these teams. But if you're a Giants fan specifically, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Watching that game was like watching the Giants offense under Joe Judge. And nothing was easy. Everything that the quarterback did had to be on the run, or it was a off tackle run. There was nothing special. A couple throws downfield here and there. Very vanilla, very bland, but nothing dynamic, nothing to make the team pop. So that's my personal experience. I want UConn to be good at football because it would accentuate all things. To have a revenue generator in this sport would be huge for the entire program, most notably basketball. So Nick Evers is a game time decision. Probably best to start Fayano and not mess around with head injuries. But time will tell, and we'll dive into it more on Friday when we get into a Football Friday with the TNT podcast boys. So thank you for making Locked On UConn your first listen today. Now go check on Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. Locked On College Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Snetto. Remember, go subscribe. Go like all my stuff. Make sure you follow all the audio versions. I'm asking you to stay locked in, stay connected. We've got a ton of great stuff coming down the pike. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.